Incredible twist. Billionaire and his dog discover shocking promise for evicted widow and daughter. As Jack Thompson peered out from his newly inherited estate, the sprawling mansion cast a long shadow over the small community of Chesterfield. High-rise buildings entombed him in luxury, yet here he felt exposed. Max, his loyal golden retriever, trotted beside him, oblivious to the weight of his owner's silent turmoil. The estate was meant to be a symbol of success, but to Jack, it felt like an anchor pulling him down into an ocean of responsibility he never wanted to face. As the sunlight streaked through the windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air, Jack felt a strange urge to connect, yet he recoiled at the thought. He had spent a lifetime building a cold empire, reformulated to squash anyone capable of pulling at his heartstrings. The resentment he often faced among the elite echoed in his mind. They viewed acts of empathy as weaknesses, traits only the underprivileged showed. Through his tight-lipped grin, Jack had perfected the art of business, but it came at a cost. Memories of a younger Jack, filled with laughter shared with family, were mere wisps taunting him from the recesses of his mind. He pressed a palm against the estate's wall, feeling the roughness of the wood against his skin, reminding him of his grandmother's unwavering love and her lessons of compassion. Before he could settle into the dense silence of the estate, he stumbled upon a stack of old letters hidden away in a dusty desk. Each one held an intimate request, a promise made by a relative to support local families in need, a pledge that echoed through generations, and now sat heavily upon his shoulders like an unseen weight. The guilt crept in with a rush. He glanced at Max, who seemed utterly unbothered by any of it. There was Edith, a widow from the neighborhood struggling to survive after being evicted. A 16-year-old daughter named Lily worked tirelessly, juggling school and jobs while others turned a blind eye. The pennies in her pocket represented their hope, and that desperation clawed at Jack's ambitions as he grappled with the idea of fulfilling his ancestors' promises. His wealthy companions would scoff, rolling their eyes at any attempt to associate with the masses. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He began to envision meetings with community members, driven by a notion to fulfill what had been promised. But skepticism loomed. The elite would see him as deluded, and the locals would suspect ulterior motives. Would they think it was just shadows dancing in the golden sunlight of his wealth? Jack felt his heart race with an impending sense of dread. Could he truly face that scrutiny? The weight of his aspirations pressed into him, and with it came the painful realization that standing on this precipice required confronting the uncomfortable truth of his privilege. Jack could almost hear the sneers echoing in his ears, the aristocrats whispering, "Philanthropy is just a fancy way to polish a tarnished reputation." And just when he was gathering the courage to step forward, the shadow of a powerful elite surfaced from behind, someone who claimed to have ties to his late relative and now wielded leverage over him. Faced with an ultimatum to halt his intentions or face ruin, a single question loomed larger than ever in his racing mind. What does real success mean in a world so mercilessly divided by wealth and circumstance? The tension tightened around him, leaving Jack at the brink of an impossible decision, while the fate of Edith and Lily dangled in fragile uncertainty. The next morning, Jack awoke feeling as though a tempest brewed inside him. The mansion felt colder, more oppressive, as if its walls were conspiring against him, urging him to remain within his gilded cage. Max, sensing Jack's somber mood, remained perched at the foot of the bed, his golden fur glowing softly in the morning light. Jack placed a hand on Max's head, seeking solace. Unbeknownst to the dog, the weight of unresolved promises clung heavily to Jack's heart and mind. After a hasty breakfast of coffee and toast, Jack pulled on a thick coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp and invigorating, an unwelcome contrast to the heaviness clouding his thoughts. He walked down the winding path that led from the estate to the first blocks of Chesterfield, determined to see Edith and Lily face to face. Each step forward felt like navigating a minefield, potential kindness complicated by arrogance and suspicion. As he strolled through the neighborhood, Jack's hands found themselves deep in his pockets, instinctively shielding him from the judgmental stares of onlookers. Whispers swirled about him, a rich billionaire straying too closely to the common folk. The streets were filled with faded colors and muted sounds, a stark reminder of the lives people lived out here, lives he had largely ignored while building his empire. The weight of the old letters lingered in the back of his mind, urging him toward action, yet parsing through the intricate dance of discomfort and self-interest left him hesitant. Finally, he approached the modest house where Edith lived. The front yard was modestly kept, its warmth rippling with faint signs of care amid a worn exterior. Jack hesitated at the gate, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. What would he say? How could he approach her without sounding insincere or patronizing? Just as he began to question his resolve, the door creaked open. Edith stood there, her weary eyes widening in shock. He quickly plastered on a smile that felt more like a mask. "Edith, I'm Jack Thompson. I was hoping we could talk." "About what? You're the last person I expected here," she replied cautiously, her voice betraying skepticism. Jack felt his resolve waver, but he pressed on. "I've come across some obligations of my family. I want to help." He noticed the flicker of doubt cross her features as she scrutinized him. The tension hung thick in the air. Edith's expression hardened as she weighed his intentions. "Help? What do you mean?" she challenged, standing firm at the threshold, arms folded. He inhaled sharply, realizing that he had underestimated the daily struggle of her life, the distrust burdened by a lifetime of broken promises from those like him. "I want to fulfill my family's pledges, Edith. I want to support you and Lily." She relaxed slightly, yet doubt lingered. "And why should I believe that?" Jack was struck, not by the accusation, but by the resonance of truth in her words. He was standing toe-to-toe with the consequences of his existence, his privilege laid bare under her discerning gaze. This was about much more than money or success. It was about authenticity, connection, and vulnerability he had long shunned. Realizing this encounter could serve as a turning point rather than an obstacle, he leaned in, desperate to engage further. "Because I want to learn, to understand what my family's pledge means beyond charity. I want to build something real, not just a facade." Edith mulled over his words, her brow furrowing. "You think you can just waltz in here, change hearts and fix lives?" Jack's heart raced as he assembled his response, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Perhaps not by waltzing, but by confronting the uncomfortable truth. Isn't that where real change starts? Her silence stretched, heavy with contemplation. Just when Jack thought he may have reached her, she nodded curtly, stepping back to let him in. But he understood the fragility of this moment. In opening the door, she had only invited him to the beginning of a much more daunting journey, one that would test not only his resolve to help, but demand an authenticity he had long ignored. As he stepped carefully into the small home, a profound awareness dawned on him. Real success might not be measured by wealth, but rather by the depth of the connections he nurtured. Yet, as their conversation began, a troubling thought lurked in the corners of his mind. Would the same shadow that loomed over him retract its claws, or would it tighten its grip as he ventured deeper into this unfamiliar territory? The room was suffused with a humble warmth, the walls lined with family photos that told stories Jack couldn't yet comprehend. As Jack settled onto a worn but inviting couch, a flicker of uncertainty shadowed his thoughts. He wasn't just crossing a physical threshold. He was stepping into a realm where his intentions faced the harsh reality of lives, intertwined with hardship. Edith took a seat across from him, her arms still crossed tightly over her chest. Jack could sense the barriers she had erected, carefully constructed through years of disappointment and caution. The moment hung heavily in the air, pregnant with unspoken words. He could almost hear the ticking clock behind him, reminding him of the fleeting nature of this opportunity. "I don't have time for whims or pity projects," she began, her voice steady yet laced with the fragility of hope. "You say you want to help, but people like you don't understand what it means to truly struggle." "I know," Jack admitted, his voice softer, stripped of bravado. "I've lived in a bubble, and I can't change that past. But maybe, just maybe, I can make a meaningful contribution moving forward." The vulnerability in his own words surprised him. Sharing this piece of himself felt simultaneously liberating and dangerous, stripping him bare in front of someone who could see through his facade. "Meaningful," she echoed, her skepticism still evident. "What does that even look like, Jack? Money? A charity fund? None of that will fix the years of neglect." Jack's mind raced, twisting on the assurance he had prepared for this conversation. "I want to do more than just cover up the cracks. I want to listen and learn, find real ways to support you and Lily in a manner that respects your dignity." Edith's brow furrowed in thought. She leaned closer, as if ready to pull the curtain back on the life she had been protecting. "Respect is earned, not given. My daughter and I have learned that the hard way." His pulse quickened at those words. Here was the crux of it, the raw truth that wrapped her life in a perpetual shroud of caution. "Then let me earn it. Let me fail and learn from those failures with you both," he offered, his determination solidifying. "That's the only way to understand fully." As they talked, layers began to fall away, each spoken word a tentative move toward a shared understanding. Jack started to glimpse the larger canvas of their lives. He learned about her late husband, a man who had fought valiantly but lost. Edith navigated life as a widow and single mother while also grappling with unreasoned fears of further loss. Jack found himself overcome with an uncomfortable empathy. His privileged background had blindfolded him for too long. Here was a woman who had fought tooth and nail to protect what little she had left. The dichotomy between their lives, once a sepulchral wall, transformed in his eyes into a daunting bridge that mirrored his own struggles, his attempts to live a life worth living amid the shadows of wealth. This conversation would require more from him than simple financial assistance. It would demand deep introspection, a challenge to greater vulnerability than he had ever faced. Each moment spent here peeled away layers of his innate self-preservation instincts, revealing the raw nerve of what real connection meant. As the sun descended lower, painting the room in hues of warmth reminiscent of a fading golden hour, Jack found himself surprised by a surge of determination. "I want to be part of this journey, Edith. Not just as someone to provide. Let me help you figure out a way together." A silence enveloped them again, but this one felt different, charged with possibility rather than doubt. He saw a subtle flicker of hope deep in her eyes, but it was tempered with cautious optimism, a reflection of her life experience. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, a loud crash echoed from another room, followed by a frightened cry. Instinctively, Jack shot up, heart racing, as Edith's face turned pale. "What was that?" he urged, adrenaline surging through him, awakening a protective instinct he never knew was there. Edith dashed toward the noise, panic taking hold. Jack followed, his mind reeling. What awaited him around the corner could change everything once again. Would he finally confront the very fears of loss he had long avoided? Or would this moment unravel any progress they had made, leaving him to question the real worth of his promises? Rounding the corner, Jack's heart raced as the echo of the crash faded into an eerie silence, pregnant with anticipation. He could sense that this moment was pivotal, a juncture where his decisions would carry weight far beyond simple words. The air felt heavier, charged with Edith's unspoken fears. The sight before him sent a jolt through his system. Lily lay sprawled on the floor, a cascade of toys scattered around her. Her little face, usually bright with laughter, was now twisted in shock. He hurried to her side, an instinct sharper than logic driving him. "Lily, hey, are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her, finding himself unexpectedly at ease in the midst of chaos. Tears brimmed in the child's eyes, but she nodded resolutely, even as the remnants of her play exploded around them. It was her dollhouse that had toppled over, its pink facade now a mess of broken plastic. Jack's gaze flickered to Edith, who stood frozen, her expression a blend of relief and residual horror. "It's just a toy, Lily," he assured gently, lifting the dollhouse with care. "We can fix this together." As the words fell from his lips, he realized that beyond mere reassurance, he genuinely meant it. This moment was the precursor to understanding. If he could help mend the shattered pieces, perhaps he could begin to bridge the divide between them all. Edith moved closer, tension visibly easing as she crouched down beside her daughter. "You scared me," she whispered, brushing a stray hair from Lily's forehead. Jack sensed the delicate balance between maternal instinct and the flash of pent-up worry within her. Here was a woman faced with a multitude of fears. In that flash, Jack recognized his own trepidation, the fear of failing in this shared journey, of being unworthy of the connection they were exploring. As Jack helped the pair pick up the scattered toys, an unexpected thought struck him. Turning to Edith, he said, "Maybe this is a lesson for us all. Things can sometimes break, but they can also be rebuilt." Her surprised gaze met his, and for the first time, he saw understanding flicker in her eyes. The encounter had catalyzed something within him, a realization that their paths, so disparate at first, were woven together by shared moments of vulnerability. Jack found himself weighing this newfound perspective against his privileged upbringing. There had always been a safety net beneath him, yet here was Edith, a woman dangling from the fraying edges of resilience. Just then, Jack noticed a photograph tucked on the edge of the table. A much younger Edith laughing with her husband, their fingers interlaced. It struck him then, the stark reality of the journey she had traveled. "You know, I'd love to hear more about those stories, about you and Lily. Whatever you're comfortable sharing," he said, surprising even himself with the suggestion. Edith looked down at her daughter, who was now humbly cradling her doll, as if it granted her the solace she needed. "You're persistent," she commented, a hint of a smile breaking the tension. "I want to earn your trust. I want to understand," he replied, feeling his own resolve solidify. It was a longing that transcended superficial charity. It was rooted in genuine human connection, in seeking to lift the veil of shared isolation. As dusk enveloped the world outside, Jack realized this journey would not be defined by grand gestures, but by small victories in understanding and cooperation. Yet uncertainty thrummed beneath the surface, a reminder of how easily hope could shatter with a single misstep. Can we set a time to talk more?" Jack ventured lightly, still unsure of whether this gesture would be seen as an intrusion or a step forward. Edith's eyes bore down on him, calculating yet softened by an ember of possibility. She looked at her daughter and took a deep breath before speaking again. "I suppose everyone deserves a chance," she replied slowly, "but you might not like what you find." The words hung in the air, beckoning a cautionary note and a promise all at once. What depths lay hidden in their lives, fragments of their truth that could redefine Jack's understanding of himself. With that thought echoing in his mind, Jack steeled himself. He was ready to dive deeper into their world, whatever it held. As dusk turned to night, he felt a surge of determination rise within him. He didn't yet know the full scale of what lay ahead, but he was eager to explore the shadows, ready to confront truths that could forge a path toward lasting connection. Little did he realize that the deeper he dove, the more profound the revelations would become, forcing him to question where his own loyalties truly lay. Jack spent the next few days juggling his usual routine with moments of reflection on his encounter with Edith and Lily. Each morning, he awoke with a nagging sense of urgency, a pull toward an obligation he had never anticipated. His work at the firm felt increasingly hollow against the backdrop of the frantic lives unfolding outside the polished glass of his office windows. While he immersed himself in meetings and presentations, he found his thoughts often drifting toward visits with Edith. The proposal to meet was still fresh in his mind, a half-formed possibility imbued with hesitance and excitement. It gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't quite reach. What layers of complexity did that simple invitation conceal? The idea of spending time with them became both a breath of fresh air and an executive dysfunction. It intrigued him, piqued his interest in the unexplored facets of human connection. At lunch one day, he paused mid-bite as he replayed their conversation. "You might not like what you find." The words haunted him, stirring a quiet fear of discovery deep within him. What truths would emerge? What biases must he confront? Would he be strong enough for whatever lay before him? This led him to a realization about his own life trajectory, a juxtaposition of privilege over hardship. His upbringing, replete with smooth trajectories and pre-scripted milestones, seemed inadequate now. What if he were faced with real conflict, real choices? Could he truly bear witness to the rawness of their struggles and offer support without condescension? That evening, Jack made a decision. He sent a message to Edith, tentatively suggesting a time on the weekend for their long-anticipated dialogue. He felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety as he hit send. The wait for her response felt like something alive, a taut string holding his thoughts in suspension. When the reply came, it was unexpectedly warm, encouraging rather than cautionary, and they arranged to meet Saturday afternoon at a local park. Jack's heart raced. He stared at the very screen that revealed her words, feeling an odd mixture of resolve and trepidation settling in his gut. On the day of their meeting, Jack dressed in smart casual attire, aiming for a balance of professionalism while trying to seem approachable. He arrived at the park a few minutes early, his nerves alive with the specter of potential confrontations. The vibrant color of flowers blooming around him contrasted sharply with his internal landscape of fear and doubt. Edith arrived with Lily in tow, a slight breeze playing with her hair as sunlight kissed her skin. Jack noticed how, despite the shadows of struggle she usually carried, there was an undeniable grace in her presence. When they greeted each other, he felt something shift within him. The weight of his intention solidified. "Thanks for meeting me, Edith," he said, genuine warmth in his voice. They found a bench under the shade of an old oak tree, the atmosphere soothing but charged with unspoken vulnerabilities. As they sat, Lily played nearby, lost in her own world of make-believe, allowing the adults the space to delve into deeper conversations. "Where should we start?" Jack asked, his tone gentle yet probing. Edith paused, her gaze distant. "There's more to our story than you might think," she replied, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of emotion. Jack's breath caught. Just then she took a deep breath, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "I thought I divorced my past, but it follows me still." And in that moment, Jack realized that her history was not just an anecdote. It was a fabric woven tightly with memories, heartache, and unrelenting hope. He felt himself teetering on the precipice of revelation, bracing himself for the depths and intricacies he would uncover about her life and the impact it could have on his own. Could these revelations reshape not only his understanding of Edith but also the very framework by which he viewed his life and options? As he looked into her eyes, a quiet determination grew within him, a commitment to connection, however complicated it might become. With her next words, something inside him clicked. "Do you really want to know what's behind the curtain?" she asked, challenging him with a steady gaze. Jack nodded, feeling the stakes of their conversation rising sharply. "Then let's begin." And with that, the true journey was set to unfold, one that would force Jack to confront the very privileges he had taken for granted and question whether he could rise to meet the trials ahead. Jack's heart thrummed in his chest as Edith's question hovered in the air, electrifying the space between them. Her steady gaze pierced through him, and for the first time, he felt completely exposed. Behind the curtain, he thought, his pulse quickening with the potential unveiling of a reality he had never considered. This was an invitation to witness her truth, and he was painfully aware of his own ignorance. "Yes," he said, the word tasting unfamiliar yet necessary on his tongue. He could sense the tension in her shoulders relax slightly. This was not a path to be taken lightly, he realized. The dialogue before him promised to peel back layers of fear, judgment, and self-righteousness. Edith inhaled deeply, the sunlight highlighting the contours of her face, and began to speak. I grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were luxuries one could barely afford. Crime was everywhere, and the failures of the system constantly reminded us of our place in the world. Jack listened intently, his own life experiences making his previous worries seem trivial. The first time my mother lost her job, it felt like the ground was pulled out from under us, she said, her eyes misting. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Every penny was accounted for. I learned how to scrap together meals from leftovers, how to be invisible in stores to avoid conflict. Until one day, you realize it's not just the money. It's the weight of the world pressing down on you. It seeps into your dreams, your aspirations, and it festers. Each word was a revelation, a snapshot of resilience and vulnerability entwined. Jack began to see the world through Edith's eyes, the filter of his privilege obscuring the stark reality she faced daily. The past isn't something we can flick away like a light switch, he murmured, surprised by the depth of his own empathy. Edith nodded, appreciation flickering in her expression. Exactly. I pretended for a long time that I could outrun it. But it's a bad relationship, you know. You think you've severed the ties, and yet every so often it drags you back in. As she spoke, Jack noticed Lily in the background, her laughter ringing out as she twirled around in a patch of sunlight, blissfully unaware of the grimmer truths being laid bare. A pang of sorrow tugged at him. How could such innocence coexist with such grit? He leaned forward, piqued by a deeper contemplation. And how do you navigate that? Edith paused, reflecting on his question. Through grit, through finding strength in community, though that's often complicated itself. She glanced at Jack. But I've also faced toxicity. The judgment from others when they see me is palpable. It's easier to label me as a statistic than to see the woman striving to improve her life for her daughter. A flicker of understanding ignited within Jack. The structural inequalities that shaped lives like Edith's had remained a mere statistic in his privileged bubble. Could he become an ally in her struggle? His thoughts churned. He wanted to step in and offer support, but feared it would come off as condescending. Would any assistance be genuine or merely a way to alleviate his own unease? His insecurities gnawed at him. The past few days of reflection now pressed against him like a tidal wave. If he was to truly aid her, he must grapple with the social confines that had shaped his perspectives. Edith, what do you truly need from me? He asked, encapsulating their growing trust. She regarded him with an intensity that left him breathless. Her answer lingered behind her eyes, threaded with hope and caution. The truth is, I can't fulfill my dreams alone, nor can I keep pretending that everything is okay. I need support, understanding, someone who sees me as whole. An idea crystallized in Jack's mind, the prospect of collaboration and a partnership that honored her experiences rather than fettering him to his insecurities. His determination surged. I might not have the answers, but I can learn, and I'm willing to stand by you in this. Edith's expression softened, a mix of caution and gratitude residing there. Yet he knew that words were just words. Their implications required living out those promises. As they continued to talk, Jack felt tension release into a fragile optimism. The path would be fraught with challenge, yet he felt a burgeoning resilience within himself. But what he didn't realize was how dizzying this newfound sense of purpose would become. As they wrapped up their conversation, Jack caught a glimpse of Lily stumbling over her own feet, momentarily grounded in her imaginative world. "What's next?" he asked, staring into the distance. Edith's voice broke through his thoughts. "You just took the first step, but readiness can come with discomfort." With that, the winds of change rustled around them, and it became clear to Jack that the real challenge had only begun. Can you face what's yet to unfold? Edith's question echoed in his mind, hinting at deeper ramifications that lay ahead. Little did he know that the next encounter would force him to confront his own past and reveal more than he had ever anticipated. Jack felt a charged silence enveloping him as he left Edith's side, the weight of her words pressing against his conscience. He ambled through the park, the lush greenery contrasting the turmoil stirring inside him. Every blade of grass seemed alive with potential, yet he felt paralyzed. The conversations he had with Edith stirred emotions he had kept bottled up, layers of discomfort peeling away to reveal raw insecurities he had never acknowledged. He could still hear Edith's voice echoing in his mind, particularly her call for support. Did he truly understand what she needed? In his determination to assist, the apprehension of overstating his goodwill lingered like a specter in his thoughts. During his ascent through the corporate ladder, he cultivated an image of a self-made man, confident, assertive, untouched by vulnerability. Yet here he was, second-guessing his instincts, questioning the sincerity of his intentions toward someone whose life trajectory had been fraught with adversity. With a purposeful resolve gripping him, Jack pulled out his phone. An idea began to take shape, a tactic he rarely employed. He reached out to a former colleague, Olivia, now an advocate for social justice initiatives, who had spent years fighting for disenfranchised communities. He needed insight, and he needed it quickly. The conversation was brief but revealing. Olivia spoke with fervor about the concerted efforts of local organizations to empower women like Edith. "You have the resources, Jack. Sometimes being there isn't merely about offering help. It's about bridging the gap with genuine understanding," she explained. "Edith needs allies who respect her autonomy, support structures that bolster rather than overshadow." Those words hung heavy on him as he ended the call. He realized then that this encounter was an opportunity, not to place a bandage over wounds, but to empower someone to build their healing. "I can't be her savior," he thought, "but I can help create pathways." That evening, as he sat in his minimalist apartment, he meticulously drafted a proposal. A blend of community support initiatives, fundraising campaigns, and mentorship programs flowed through his mind. Each word became a step forward in redefining his role, not as a benefactor but as a facilitator of change. Days turned into weeks, and Jack immersed himself in research. He attended meetings, engaging with activists and educators passionate about systemic change. He was faced with unsettling truths about himself, his ignorance, the privileges he had taken for granted, and the ways he had benefited from a system that often excluded others. Reflecting on the disparities, Jack felt the stirrings of guilt, but countered it with commitment. But all that work did not quell the unsettled feeling that hovered around him like a specter. What if he stumbled? What if he overstepped in Edith's world as he tried to navigate this new terrain? He needed clarity. And so, he reached out to Edith once more, willing to put forth his nascent ideas, prepared to articulate the intention behind them, if only to demystify his role as a partner in her journey. The day they arranged to meet again, Jack's anticipation mixed with an unnerving apprehension. What would she think of his ambitions? Would she embrace the support? Would he come off as patronizing or on point in resonating her need for agency? Seated across from her in the familiar cafe, he waited for her arrival. Jack could feel the butterflies in his stomach increasing with every minute that passed. Just then, the bell jingled as the door opened, and Jack glanced up, heart speeding as he saw Edith enter with Lily. Their presence illuminated the room with warmth, but Jack felt the urgency pulse through him. This was not merely a meeting over coffee. It was the moment he hoped to redefine everything that had transpired. "Are you ready for this?" he whispered to himself as he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. Before he could gather his thoughts into a cohesive narrative, their eyes locked, and he felt not only the weight of what he was about to propose, but the potential for something transformative for all involved, not just for Edith, but for himself. Unbeknownst to Jack, this moment would challenge everything he thought he understood about himself and the significance of support. Leaves rustled outside as if the world was conspiring with him, heralding an impending revelation that would shift everything they had just built. And as Edith approached, her brow furrowing with curiosity, Jack knew the true test was about to begin. Would he be able to maintain the delicate balance of support and respect she so desperately needed? Only the unfolding conversation would reveal the answers and determine the course of their intertwined fates moving forward. Jack could feel the acceleration of his pulse as Edith and Lily approached. The warmth in the cafe mingled with the cold seriousness of his intent. He hadn't yet solidified his thoughts into a coherent message, yet the gravity of the moment pressed heavily upon him, As they settled at the table, Jack studied Edith's face. The shadows of her past clung to her, but there was also a flicker of hope, a light that he felt compelled to protect. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice steadying in the midst of his internal turmoil. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation." Edith nodded, her expression unreadable, while Lily fidgeted in her chair. Jack gathered the courage to continue. "I've been exploring ways to support you and others in situations like yours, not just as someone who offers help, but as someone who creates paths for deeper change. I've put together some ideas." He pulled out a notepad filled with notes and sketches and placed it between them, a lifeline thrown into uncertain waters. Lily's eyes flickered to the notepad, confusion dancing across her youthful features. "Can you help us find a place to live?" she asked, the innocence of her question tugging at Jack's heart. "We'll get there," Jack replied softly, looking back to Edith. "This is about more than just housing. I want to empower you." He searched her eyes, seeking a connection, a sign that his intentions were being understood. "I think we can collaborate on something impactful. Community programs that advocate for women facing similar hardships." A moment of silence ensued. Jack could sense the weight of Edith's skepticism. "What do you gain from this, Jack?" she asked, her tone sharp yet measured. "Why do you care?" The question pierced the air, stilling Jack's thoughts momentarily. He had rehearsed this. He hadn't prepared for this level of scrutiny. "It's not about me," he stammered, uncertainty creeping into his voice. It's about realizing the role I play and the places I've benefited unfairly. I can't pretend to understand your journey, but I want to be involved in building something that acknowledges what's been lacking." Her gaze remained fixed on him, her expression a mask of contemplation. Jack's stomach twisted as he recognized the truth in his admission. He was partly motivated by guilt and a desire for redemption. He took a breath, steeling himself against the discomfort of vulnerability. "I think I owe it to myself and others to learn, to help support real change, to stand beside you, not above you." Lily watched, wide-eyed, as these grown-ups tangled through their complexities. Jack turned back to Edith, who had softened slightly, though her defenses remained intact. "What do you think?" he asked, desperation threading through his voice. "It sounds good," she responded slowly, "but trust isn't built from ideas alone. We've walked different roads." Her words echoed the chasm between them, pressing against the ideals he wished to embody. "I understand," Jack replied. "What if we work together, through what you need, how I can connect you to the right people, and what support structures we can build? I want to hear from you about your experiences, your needs. I don't want this to be a one-sided effort." Edith's brow furrowed deeper, and Jack could sense the challenge within her. "Okay, let's say I'm interested. You'd need to come into my world, one step at a time. Are you willing to meet that challenge?" The weight of her words entwined with his resolve. "I'm ready." The vow formed a bridge, a commitment to meeting Edith where she stood, to engaging in a dialogue rather than projecting a savior mentality. As the conversation unfolded, they exchanged insights, sharing stories and aspirations. With each shared anecdote, Jack felt himself grow ever closer to the core of what was needed, a myriad of emotions threading through him, fear, hope, and a dawning sense of purpose that whispered of the potential he possessed. Yet deep within, insecurity simmered. His ambitions felt both exhilarating and daunting. Could he truly navigate the intricacies of her life while respecting her autonomy? The questions circled in his mind as he sought to stabilize his footing on this new terrain. Unbeknownst to him, this very discussion could lead to pivotal upheavals, both in his life and in the lives of those around him. Alone in his thoughts, Jack confronted the weighty responsibility he was inviting. As the meeting meandered toward its conclusion, he felt the undeniable shift of their dynamic, a pivot that could either break him or build him into something entirely new, and as they finally reached an agreement to collaborate. A flicker of doubt sparked in the back of his mind. Were his intentions genuine enough to withstand the unfolding complexity that awaited? The path ahead was both thrilling and terrifying, and Jack knew he was on the precipice of a transformation that would demand everything he had. As they left the cafe together, footsteps echoing in unison, the reality of their new alliance weighed heavily on his shoulders. Jack couldn't shake the sense that they were stepping into uncharted territory. Change loomed ahead, fraught with unseen challenges. The air outside felt charged with possibility as he turned to Edith. "I hope this is just the beginning," he said, the uncertainty still thick in his voice. But what he didn't know was that the true test of their alliance awaited just around the corner, a reckoning that would define both their futures as they navigated the complexities of trust, vulnerability, and support. Doubt gnawed at Jack as he walked alongside Edith and Lily, the cheerful bustle of the street a stark contrast to the gravity of their discussions. He'd stepped into this commitment, eager to learn and lend his strength to support them, yet the enormity of what lay ahead began to stretch his apprehensions thin. He could almost hear the echoes of their conversation winding back to the heart of his concerns. Would he be able to genuinely contribute without overstepping? The line between ally and savior blurred ominously. That evening, as Jack sat on his couch, flipping through the notes he took during the meeting, he felt an unsettling combination of hope and fear. A strategic plan had begun to form, but each bullet point highlighted the disparities they faced. Could he truly grasp the intricacies of Edith's life? His mind drifted to her words, "You'd need to come into my world." The idea pulsated in his thoughts. Nothing felt more daunting. In the following days, Jack decided to immerse himself fully. He researched community needs, reached out to local organizations, and fostered connections that could assist in their journey. Yet every interaction was laced with his insecurities. Would he come across as patronizing? Did his privilege blind him to the real issues? Each question burdened him with concern, the lines between intention and impact sharp and volatile. He felt an escalating urgency to establish a palpable change, and so he arranged another meeting with Edith and Lily. This time he scouted a cozier local library, choosing a welcoming environment more attuned to their needs. On the day of the meeting, he arrived early, poring over his notes, rehearsing key points that now felt uncomfortable, even exploitative in nature. When Edith and Lily arrived, Jack sensed a shift in dynamics. There was no pretext of formality. The palpable heaviness hung in the air between them. "Let's dive in," Jack insisted, feeling the push of time. He unfolded his ideas on community programs and access pathways, trying to articulate solutions with clarity and passion, though the fear of misinterpretation loomed constantly. But as he presented his vision, Edith's tight demeanor revealed her reservations, and his stomach knotted with anxiety. "You talk about pathways like they are paved and clear," she challenged, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "For us, pathways are blocked by obstacles you haven't even seen." Jack's breath caught. It was a reminder that no amount of planning could encapsulate the subtexts of their struggles. He'd been so fixated on solutions that he'd neglected to remain engaged in the emotions underpinning their reality. "You're right," he conceded, forcing the knot of inadequacy down. "I've read the facts, but I can only understand a fraction when I haven't lived this life." Her brow lifted slightly, and he observed her soften, a flicker of vulnerability peeking through her armor. "Look," he continued, voice steadied by newfound determination. "I need your help to truly understand, to help guide me in this journey. What shifts can we make together that could actually ease these obstacles?" A moment passed. He could see her racing thoughts reflected in the shimmer of her eyes, contemplating whether to meet him halfway. "We'd start with small, actionable steps that we define. It's not about you rescuing us. It's about recognizing that we can both grow through this. But it demands honesty and commitment on both sides." The challenge invigorated him. This was no longer merely a process of assisting. It was a shared commitment. As they expanded the dialogue into practical strategies, Jack felt warmth erupt in his chest, a glimmer of hope igniting within the stark realities they uncovered. Trust was a currency to be built gradually, with each shared piece of their lives. But as they began to weave their plans into tangible proposals, an unforeseen tension punctured the room. Jack couldn't dismiss the nagging voice reminding him that challenges lay just around the corner. All too soon, He would face moments that would test their evolving trust and the very foundation of his integrity. And then, as they finalized their conversation, a message buzzed on Jack's phone, an unknown number with a cryptic text that read, "I know what you're trying to do, and it could cost you. Stop now." The uneasiness morphed into impending dread, a crucial conflict surfacing that threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. Jack glanced at Edith and Lily, the weight of their futures heavy upon him. This was not just a personal journey. It was a precipice of consequence, spiraling into the unknown. Jack stood frozen, the tension coiling inside him as the implications of the text sunk in. The uncertainty of the sender lingered like an ominous cloud, casting shadows over his budding alliance with Edith and Lily. With each heartbeat, fear fanned the flames of doubt within him. As he glanced at Edith's hopeful expression, a surge of resolve surged through him. This was the crux of his transformation. He would not allow the shadows of his past to dictate the potential of their future. "Edith." He took a deep breath, his resolve igniting. "I received a message just now," he said, quickly revealing the text and its intimidating tone. Her brow furrowed, skepticism brewing again, yet he sensed a thread of understanding weaving through her concentration. "It's a threat. Someone wants to halt this," he continued. "But I'm not backing down. This journey is too important, not just for us but for everyone whose lives we might touch." Edith's expression shifted as she absorbed his words. A moment passed in silence, her gaze piercing through the noise of uncertainty. "Then we'll confront it together. If someone is trying to intimidate you, it means they see the potential of what we're building." Jack marveled at the conviction behind her response. This was what he had been seeking, an authentic partnership, forged through shared vulnerabilities and strength. "You're right," he answered, feeling a wave of clarity wash over him. "We'll take this on together." As they resumed discussions, Jack felt the fire within him stoke into a fervent urgency to uphold their mission. With Edith by his side, their conversations transformed from mere plans into a manifesto for change. They defined steps, targeting community outreach, gathering resources, and engaging local businesses to create sustainable support systems for women like Edith across Chesterfield. Days blurred into weeks as they thrived in collaborative efforts, fueled by newfound optimism. Jack felt his knowledge broaden, stepping outside the confines of his insulated experiences. He learned about resilience, the grit that guided lives underfoot. The fear from the threatening message faded slowly, replaced by a palpable camaraderie that bridged their worlds. It was during one community meeting, ripe with budding possibilities, that they witnessed the fruits of their labor flipping the script. Empowered women sharing their stories. Stories echoed with shared laughter, tears, and triumphs. Jack watched as Edith stood poised before the crowd. Her words resonated with the intensity of her journey. He felt pride swell in his chest. This was their legacy in motion. In a subsequent conversation, Jack declared, "I could never have imagined this impact without you." Their ongoing dynamic had transcended mere camaraderie. It was a partnership, a shared mission entwined with purpose, mutual respect, and a commitment not just to the cause but to each other. Individual growth expanded before them, a journey written through trust. And yet the threat that had initially shaken his resolve lingered in the background, but without the same power. He refused to allow fear an opportunity to seize progress, and with every stride they made, nightmares turned into stepping stones upon which they soared. It was in those defining moments that Jack recognized his ultimate achievement. No longer was he the isolated wealthy man entangled in a cold empire. He was a catalyst for hope, carving pathways alongside Edith, driven by authenticity and respect. Months later, he stood by Edith at a community event once thought unachievable. The room buzzed with energy, hope, and resilience, a living testament to their hard-won success. The atmosphere was alive, glowing with anticipation and ambition. As they concluded their presentations, the applause resonated with a profound conviction, a validation of their journey. Jack smiled, a radiating warmth filling him. He had ventured into vulnerability and turned hesitation into collaboration. Edith turned and met his gaze, unspoken gratitude shimmering in her eyes. It dawned on him that this was not only her victory, but a celebration of their shared commitment, a tightly woven narrative of triumph over adversity. Jack stood tall, arms wide as the world around him erupted in applause. There he was, no longer just Jack Thompson, but a man who had conquered the chains of privilege, reclaimed a sense of purpose, and forged genuine connections to uplift others. At last Jack understood the depths of true success. It wasn't just wealth or power, it was connection, engagement, and transformation, both personal and collective. The lines he had drawn in the sand blurred away. Jack embraced the knowledge that this journey would only continue, fueled by collective dreams, mutual respect, and, above all, the understanding that true impact was born from walking together, side by side. This was the moment of genuine transformation and true countenance. Jack now stood, resolute and whole, within a tapestry of interconnected lives, forging an unstoppable future destined to change the world. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending.